All right, welcome everyone. I'm titling this one. It's going to be Diesel, Dollars, and Devils because there's so much going on in the world today that comes back to one passage of Scripture, ultimately, um, that we're seeing being manifest in real time and real event. And that's First Timothy 6:10 that tells us that the love of money is the root of all evil. And if you look at the Ten Commandments, you see as well that coveting that which belongs to another is incorporated in those do nots and thou shalt nots. God has his proper right, dominion, and rule. And when we don't give that to him, when we do not honor that, it's because we are coveting something that belongs to him and not us. In the same way with stealing or adultery, etc. It all comes to wanting something that belongs to another. And that's the driving force for many. There's many people that are actively working for Satan that have no idea that they are. Their goal is just make money, get wealth, get richer, get more power, and so forth. And they don't even realize who the ultimate root of their ideologies are. After this quick talk, I'm going to link a video, or actually add a video clip to the end of this that will help you see how this is done in the form of the Hegelian Dialectic, and maybe give you a better understanding of how they bring a lot of things to pass while using the very masses to do it. It's problem, reaction, solution. They have a solution, they have an end goal. So they manufacture a problem. And that problem has an expected reaction, which ultimately will have the people begging for the solution, begging to bring about the very thing that the rich, merchants, elites, and so forth wanted from the beginning. Maybe you have or haven't heard that in the West, that the U.S. has said that their diesel supply is in dire straits, that it is in fear of running out. And the thing that will help you to understand is this is not a unexpected problem. This is a problem that was put in place by those who pull the strings behind the curtain, and that is use the politicians to voice what is going on by shutting down the drilling, the fracking, refineries, etc. This was the obvious outcome. This didn't catch anyone that was involved really by surprise. But what you'll see is when a group of people have the means to correct the problem already established but are unwilling to use them, then there was a hidden agenda from the start. Like in the U.S., you have many, many refineries that were closed that could be opened. We have many avenues by which we can drill and frack for oil and become more energy independent, but we are not allowed to use them. So that the goal always was to cause a problem with what, in essence, to this country is the very blood that fuels the body of the economy, and that's diesel fuel and gasoline. Diesel fuel is incorporated into so many of your large processes that keep this country strong. Everything from your trains to your trucks that ship everything, to your diesel generators that perhaps are used at hospitals that give them a little security if the grid goes down for a time, to the giant tractors and combines and equipment and trucks that are in agriculture, industries of all sorts, and just you getting back and forth to work. The policies that they were put in place, unfortunately, those that are even speaking out against this keep using the term failed policies. And they're not failing at all in the fact that they're bringing about exactly what they desire, which is this great reset idea, to where they redistribute the wealth, as you've seen over the past couple years, largely and primarily into the hands of the already rich. You have the Gates and the Bezos and the stockholders in Walmart and all of these companies had record years, while the rest of the world was put essentially in house arrest, and they call it lockdown. It's amazing how if a problem just happens to come about, how a solution just happens to magically appear for whatever it is, whether it's an ailment, um, economical problem. It's just amazing how there just happens to be a solution that'll just magically appear, and that's the agenda. That's the end goal. And when you see that profit being pulled from the middle class and even the lower classes and put into the hands of the filthy rich, then if you follow that yellow brick road, as Frank L. Bond implied quite cleverly, actually, in The Wizard of Oz, you'll find the little man hiding behind the curtain, pulling the strings and making everything work. But it's said in this, and fear is a big part of this. They love to push fear, and they like to cause panic. And even if it's a real manufactured or even fake problem that is there, they love to feed off the fear and the panic because it helps sway the masses to have them step in and save them, so to speak. But as this Newsweek article points out from just not even 2 weeks ago, that diesel shortage, the prices are skyrocketing over fears that supply could run out. I know I've personally seen convenience stores that are staple stores that have bags on their diesel pumps already. A report that I saw from Kingston said no diesel there already, and you'll see now that with the supplies low, there'll be increased panic, which will just further help, get rid of what stockpile we have left, which also is by design. You see, you got to understand, we have the diesel that could be used here. That's not the problem. And you see that in many places, they have the supplies, but they're not making it to the people, whether it's food shortages, gas shortages, diesel shortages, whatever. These are manufactured in their design because the U.S. diesel exports, where we send to other countries, climbed to record highs as the world faces shortage, to include the country that's shipping off the diesel that's needed here to keep everything going. That's like donating all your blood and you dying and saying that, well, there was 8 people that needed all of my blood, instead of giving a pint here and there as you can, but keeping yourself healthy so that you can continue to give that pint later. That's exactly what we're seeing. We're sending and pumping out nonstop these record levels and record profits. That love of money. Say Satan can use somebody that's not even religious. You just flash those dollars and they'll do it. They'll do the dance, and that's what we're seeing. So we need to really come to grips. This is part of the Hegelian dialectic that is being used every day, to where they create a problem, they expect the reaction, which is panic. Which, when you're talking about an entire first world country all of a sudden coming to a grinding halt for some reason, that instills a little angst in someone, and then the solution will be something that we'll probably see in the coming months. And a lot of it probably has to do with this garbage Gaia worship, this Mother Earth worship of trying to make everything go green, even though if you do the studies, your green vehicles and your battery-powered cars use almost as much carbon. They just make a lot more money, but almost as much of a carbon footprint, so-called, as a gas-powered car, between the manufacture and the life cycles, the charging the vehicle, etc., and the destruction to the planet in lithium mining. But these are things you need. If you'll take one thing away from this, none of this is catching the elites by surprise. None of this is catching the politicians by surprise. This is by design. This is on purpose. They want to cause anxiety and suffering. They actually do want to thin the world out by a great deal in the amount of people. And they probably have a lot of ideas on how to do that, be it through certain procedures that you maybe can or maybe can't talk about, depending on how they want to sway it for that day, food with your GMO, and all these other things, while getting filthy rich. If you notice, they never lose their sales in the midst of all this. So I'm going to play this video and hope you can grasp this, maybe share it with someone else that they can understand how the Hegelian dialectic works, how they use it politically and socially in so many different ways to bring about mass changes in a short amount of time. You know, a lot of refineries, they've just told us right out, hey, they're probably not going to come back online. Yeah, we could hit the switch, kind of like Germany. We could put them nuclear power plants back online. We can go in, fire them puppies up, and everybody be nice and warm come the winter. But let's not do that. Why? Because they say Mother Earth worship. Ultimately, for many, it's just profit and misery and suffering. All those that hate God love death. They really, really do. So I hope this video will be informative to you and helpful, and will in some way help you to get maybe a bigger picture of what maybe you need to do in your household as you realize that all of this, the food shortages, the businesses closing, there was a bigger agenda from the start. There's a bigger agenda in play. It ultimately comes into globalism, bringing everybody together. The ultimate solution being, hey, let's just put a few people in charge, and ultimately one in charge, and we'll get everybody on the same sheet with the same economy, and we'll just reset this thing, and it'll be all better. They've done this with digital currency. I'll just throw that out there, be it Bitcoin, these central bank digital currencies that are a lot closer to their beta runs maybe than people realize. I mean, they're just foaming at the mouth to be able to create digital dollars that have an off and on switch, that, like Justin Trudeau, if you happen to not agree with somebody politically, they can just hit the off switch on your ability to buy or sell. For those that read your Bible all the way to the end, that sounds kind of like a stage setting, like a piece in the game board to a certain mark in time that's foretold of in Scripture. So just, be alert, be discerning, look around, and you see that these game pieces are being put on the board, and they have a goal in mind. Ultimately, we know that they will lose, but prior to that, you see a period of time in which they will obtain rule. Satan will ultimately attain rule for a short period of time, but that is a time to be considered and thought about, because Scripture tells us that, because it's not something that we're going to change, but it is something that we can be prepared for a little better if we kind of think about it, and come to grips with what that may or may entail. Ultimately, the victory is the Lord's. We've read the end of the book, so none of this is to instill fear, but quite the opposite. Just maybe to bring you into a mindset by which you might seek to be just a little more attentive and suspicious about what you see going on. So till next time, I want to say take care, God bless, enjoy the video, and I hope that it's a blessing to you. And just remember, Christ wins.
But what is the best way to sell big government and then world government to a people like ours, historically devoted to an independent republic of limited powers? The answer is simple. In revolutionary literature, the tactic is known as pressure from above and below. It's the strategy that Colonel House laid down in his book, Philip Drew, Administrator. Deliberately create problems, and then offer only those solutions that result in the expansion of government. Create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that the abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price for a return to domestic tranquility and world peace. If those who seek world dominion can stimulate leftist mobs into violent confrontation with local law enforcement, and also provide exhaustive news coverage so that the entire nation can see and tremble, then the peaceful and freedom-loving majority can be programmed to accept a vast expansion of government powers and even a national police force, offered supposedly to end the violence. If those who seek world dominion can raise the specter of an enemy, armed to the teeth with superior atomic weapons on the verge of launching a nuclear holocaust, and also offer world government as the prevention, then millions of Americans can be programmed to accept the loss of national sovereignty as our last best hope for peace. This is the meaning of pressure from above and below. To put over police-state measures at home, they need chaos, crime, and anarchy in the streets. To sell the idea of world government, they need the constant threat of nuclear war. Or, as they say in revolutionary circles, the real action is in the reaction. In 1968, Random House Incorporated published this book by James Coonan, The Strawberry Statement, Notes of a College Revolutionary. Coonan carries the usual New Left credentials, and is a classic example of the extent to which a highly intelligent mind can be programmed by the establishment into thinking that it is acting against the establishment. Coonan was one of the leading participants in the first student seizure of an American university, which occurred at Columbia in April of 1968. Initially, the movement was not large, and easily could have been stopped by a simple police action. But as usual, the anti-establishment forces received their greatest help from the establishment itself. For several days, police were told not to interfere. Meanwhile, university officials groveled in the face of outrageous propaganda charges, and the media made national heroes of the rebelling students. MGM even made a movie out of Coonan's book. On page 130, Coonan wrote, "In the evening I went up to the U to check out a strategy meeting. A kid was giving a report on the SDS convention. He said that at the convention, men from Business International roundtables, the meeting sponsored by Business International for their client groups and heads of government, tried to buy up a few radicals. They offered to finance our demonstrations in Chicago. We were also offered ESSO, or Rockefeller money. They want us to make a lot of radical commotion so they can look more in the center as they move to the left." Jerry Kirk, while a student at the University of Chicago, was active in the SDS, the Du Bois Club, the Black Panthers, and the Communist Party. In 1969, Mr. Kirk broke from the party, and the following year testified before the House and Senate Internal Security Committees. Here is what Mr. Kirk has told us. "Young people have no conception of the conspiracy strategy of pressure from above and pressure from below. They have no idea that they're playing into the hands of the establishment they claim to hate. The radicals think they're fighting the forces of the super-rich, like Rockefeller and Ford, and don't realize that it is precisely such forces which are behind their own revolution, financing it, and using it for their own purposes." When Stokely Carmichael was head of the militant revolutionary group known as SNCC, he was invited to speak at the University of Chicago. Jerry Kirk, then still a Black Panther, was among those who attended, and here is how he described Carmichael's appearance. Mr. Carmichael was obviously in the middle of something rather important, which made him more nervous and more tense than in the past. He started speaking of things which he said he could not have said before, because his research was not finished. He spoke of the false consciousness of many blacks who believed the Jews were the instrument of oppression of blacks. And he made note of the fact that even though many Jewish people, for example in New York, own quite a bit of land, one must understand that the overwhelming percentages of mortgages in Harlem was owned not by Jewish people, but by Morgan Guarantee Trust, the Morgan family, and Chase Manhattan Bank, the Rockefellers. He repeated the line from the song he liked so well. "Something is happening here, but you don't know quite what it is, do you, Mr. Jones?" What he was getting at was that the Jews were simply one strata of society who are themselves being oppressed by people who were much richer and much more powerful. In the agencies of this power, he cited banks, the chief among which were Morgan Guarantee Trust and Chase Manhattan, and the foundations connected with these monoliths. It was not long after this that Stokely Carmichael mysteriously was ousted from both SNCC and the Black Panthers. Apparently, he had learned too much. More and more young radicals are beginning to wake up to the fact that their entire lives have been carefully programmed by the very people who are their hate symbols. They're beginning to realize that their so-called anti-establishment outlook actually is the calculated product of the establishment press, the establishment communications media, the establishment entertainment industry, the establishment schools. Rich men's corporations publish and popularize revolutionary books and songs. Through advertising, rich men's businesses subsidize revolutionary magazines. Rich men's tax-exempt foundations pour millions of dollars into left-wing organizations. The federal establishment in Washington, through agencies like the OEO, provide weekly paychecks to thousands of hardcore revolutionaries. And so we return again to the basic question, why? Why does the establishment publicly condemn but privately support the anti-establishment movement? Former communist Jerry Kirk answers, the idea is to create a situation where the people are so frightened of the violence all around them that they will throw their hands up in the air and demand, federal government, do something. And the only choice open will be martial law. The communists, black militants, and revolutionaries will never succeed in overthrowing the government of the United States. But unless they are stopped, they will scare the American people into accepting socialism from Washington and statist rule by the insiders of the establishment. This is what it is really all about.